The wind howled across the cracked earth of the Arizona Badlands like the cry of a wounded animal, whipping dust into the eyes of a woman who had not slept in 3 nights. Her name was Najoni, an Apache widow whose husband had vanished into the copper mines 2 winters ago, swallowed by a collapse that left only his hat behind. In her arms she clutched a small bundle wrapped in a threadbare blanket, her daughter, little Aida, 4 years old, burning with fever and too weak to cry. The child's lips were cracked, her breathing shallow, and every ragged exhale felt like a knife in Najoni's chest. She had walked 20 miles from the reservation, past the trading post that turned her away, past the mission that had no more rice, until the neon glow of a roadside saloon flickered ahead like a false promise. The sign read, "The Rusty Spur," and beneath it stood a cowboy in a weathered duster, leaning against a post as if he owned the night. Najoni's knees buckled. She pressed Aida closer, felt the child's heat seep through the blanket, and with the last of her strength she stepped into the cone of yellow light. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw as sagebrush, "hire me for 1 night. My daughter is very hungry." The cowboy's eyes, storm gray and unreadable, met hers, and in that moment the desert itself seemed to hold its breath. If you believe in kindness and second chances, hit that like button, drop a comment below, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Moments of Love so we can keep bringing you stories that remind us what it means to be human. The saloon smelled of stale beer, cigar smoke, and the faint metallic tang of desperation. Men crowded the bar, their laughter brittle, their eyes glazed from whiskey and regret. Najoni stood just inside the swinging doors, Aida limp against her shoulder, the child's small hand curled like a dried leaf around her mother's braid. She had no plan beyond the words she had rehearsed in the dark. "Hire me, 1 night, anything to buy milk, medicine, a crust of bread." The bartender, a thick-set man with a scar that pulled his mouth into a permanent sneer, glanced up and waved her away as if she were a stray dog. But the cowboy, Jake Harlan, though she did not yet know his name, pushed off the post and crossed the sawdust floor in 3 slow strides. He was tall, sun-leathered, with a jaw shadowed by 3 days of stubble and a hat that had seen better decades. His boots left faint prints in the dust as he stopped in front of her. Up close, Najoni saw the weariness in his face, the kind that came from burying too many friends and too many dreams. He looked at Aida, then at the desperation carved into every line of Najoni's body, and something shifted behind his eyes. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled $10 bill, and pressed it into her hand. "For the kid," he said, voice low, almost lost beneath the piano's tinny tune. But Najoni shook her head. Pride was all she had left, and she would not take charity from a stranger. "Work," she insisted. "I clean. I cook. 1 night." Jake studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward the back door. "Kitchen's a mess. Start there." The kitchen was a battlefield of grease and broken dreams. Pots overflowed with congealed beans, the floor sticky with spilled beer, the air thick with the ghosts of 1,000 bad decisions. Najoni laid Aida on a sack of flour in the corner, whispering apologies in Dene, promising the child would eat soon. She rolled up the sleeves of her faded calico dress and attacked the chaos with a ferocity born of terror. Her hands, calloused from years of weaving and scrubbing, moved like pistons, scraping, scouring, stacking. The cook, a grizzled man named Paco who had lost 2 fingers to a cleaver, watched her with suspicion that slowly melted into grudging respect. Jake lingered in the doorway, arms crossed, saying nothing. Outside, The wind rattled the tin roof, and inside, the fever in Aida's small body climbed higher. Najoni's arms trembled as she lifted a cauldron of dishwater, her vision blurring with exhaustion and unshed tears. She had not eaten in 2 days herself, but every ache was a prayer that her daughter would survive the night. When the last pot gleamed and the floor no longer stuck to her moccasins, Paco slid a plate across the counter. Beans, a hunk of cornbread, a strip of jerky. Najoni's hands shook as she broke the bread into tiny pieces, mixing it with water to soften it for Aida's swollen throat. The child managed 3 bites before sleep claimed her again, and Najoni pressed her lips to the damp curls on her daughter's forehead, tasting salt and fear. Jake watched from the shadows, his own hunger a different kind, hunger for something he could not name. He had come to the rusty spur to drink away the memory of a ranch sold for taxes, a wife buried under a cottonwood tree, a life that had slipped through his fingers like sand. He had planned to lose himself in whiskey and cards, to wake up tomorrow with nothing but a headache and the open road. But the sight of Najoni, her fierce grace, the way she shielded her child like a mother wolf, cracked something open inside him. He found himself in the storeroom, counting cans of peaches and sacks of pinto beans, calculating what he could spare from his own dwindling stash. When Najoni emerged from the kitchen, her face streaked with soot and tears, he was waiting with a tin cup of coffee and a proposition. "There's a line shack 5 miles west," he said. "Abandoned, but solid. Wood stove, cot, well that still pumps. You and the girl can stay till she's on her feet." Najoni's eyes narrowed. Trust was a luxury she could not afford, but Aida's fevered whimper decided for her. She nodded once, a queen granting a favor to a peasant. The ride to the shack was a fever dream of moonlight and mesquite. Jake drove a battered Ford pickup that coughed like an old man, Najoni in the passenger seat with Aida cradled in her lap. The child's breathing had turned raspy, each inhale a small battle. Jake kept his eyes on the rutted track, but his mind raced. He had not shared his roof with anyone since Sarah died, had not allowed himself to care. Yet here he was, hauling a stranger and her dying child into the night. The shack appeared like a mirage, peeling paint, sagging porch, but the door opened without protest. Inside, dust motes danced in the beam of Jake's flashlight. He built a fire while Najoni laid Aida on the cot, wrapping her in a quilt that smelled of cedar and forgotten summers. The flames caught, casting golden light across the child's flushed cheeks, and for the first time in days Najoni allowed herself to breathe. Jake rummaged in the truck and returned with a canvas bag, canned milk, aspirin, a jar of honey thick as amber. He heated the milk over the fire, stirring in honey until it steamed, and Najoni fed it to Aida spoonful by spoonful. The child's eyes fluttered open, clear for a moment, and she managed a ghost of a smile. "Mama," she whispered, and the sound broke something in Jake's chest he had thought long dead. Dawn painted the desert rose and gold, revealing a landscape scarred by arroyos and dotted with saguaro skeletons. Najoni stepped onto the porch, her body aching but her heart lighter. Aida slept inside, fever broken, chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Jake was already at work, hammering boards over a broken window, hauling water from the well in buckets that sloshed against his boots. He had found a crate of nails in the truck, a coil of rope, a determination he had not felt in years. Najoni watched him, this stranger who had given them shelter without asking for payment, and felt the first stirrings of hope. She joined him, her hands steady now, passing tools, holding boards, their movements falling into a rhythm as natural as breathing. By midday the shack was transformed. Windows patched, floor swept, a pot of beans simmering on the stove. Jake produced a battered guitar from the truck's toolbox and strummed a lullaby his mother used to sing, the notes floating out across the desert like a benediction. Aida sat up on the cot, clapping her small hands, her laughter a sound so pure it brought tears to Najoni's eyes. Days blurred into weeks. The fever left Aida as suddenly as it had come, leaving behind a child who toddled across the packed earth floor, chasing dust devils and begging Jake to lift her onto his shoulders. Najoni's hands, once weapons against despair, now wove baskets from willow branches, each one a promise of tomorrow. She sold them at the trading post, the coins clinking into a coffee can labeled, Aida's future. Jake fixed the truck, patched the roof, taught Aida to whistle through a blade of grass. He told stories of cattle drives and ghost towns, of a wife who loved wildflowers and a son who never came home from Korea. Najoni listened, her silence a balm, and in return she spoke of her husband's laughter, of Apache creation stories, of a life before grief. The shack, once a tomb of loneliness, became a hearth. They ate pinto beans and fry bread, drank coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe, and watched sunsets bleed across the sky like spilled paint. Jake found himself smiling at Aida's mispronunciations, at Najoni's quiet strength, at the way hope had crept back into his bones. But the desert is a jealous lover, and it does not surrender its prizes easily. Word reached the reservation that Najoni had taken up with a white man, and old angers flared. A delegation arrived one blistering afternoon, 3 elders in a dusty sedan, their faces carved from the same stone as the mountains. They stood on the porch, eyes hard, and demanded Najoni return. "You shame us," the leader said, his voice flat as a rifle shot. "Your husband's spirit wanders unrested." Najoni's chin lifted, but her hands trembled. Aida clung to her skirts, sensing the storm. Jake stepped forward, hat in hand, but the elders ignored him as if he were dust. That night Najoni sat by the fire, staring into the flames, torn between blood and the fragile new family she had found. Jake said nothing, only placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch steady as bedrock. In the morning she packed their few belongings, kissed Aida's sleeping forehead, and walked out to meet the elders. But Aida's wail, sharp, piercing, heartbroken, stopped her cold. The child ran to Jake, burying her face in his shirt, and something in Najoni broke open. She turned back, tears streaming, and faced the elders. "My daughter chooses," she said, voice steady now. "And so do I." The elders left in silence, tires spitting gravel, and the desert exhaled. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can rewrite destinies, please like this video, comment below with the moment that moved you most, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Moments of Love. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story that proves love is the strongest force on earth. Before we go, a special request. Comment the line, "Second chances are real," if you believe Najoni, Aida, and Jake deserved their happy ending. Your words keep their story alive. Months later, the shack had a fresh coat of paint the color of desert bloom. A garden flourished where sagebrush once ruled, tomatoes fat as fists, chilies glowing like embers. Aida chased chickens Jake had bartered for, her laughter a bell across the plain. Najoni's baskets sold at the trading post for prices that made her blink in disbelief, and she enrolled in night classes at the community college, dreaming of a nursing degree. Jake fixed fences for neighboring ranches, his hands sure, his heart full. They married on a spring evening under a sky thick with stars, Aida scattering wildflower petals that caught the wind like tiny prayers. The elders sent a blanket woven in traditional patterns, a silent blessing. And on quiet nights, when the fire crackled and the coyotes sang, Jake would pull Najoni close and whisper the words she had once begged a stranger for. I hired you for one night, but I'm keeping you forever. Outside, the desert stretched endless and unforgiving, but inside the shack love had taken root, fierce and unyielding, a testament that even in the harshest soil, miracles can bloom.